Welcome to Charts Today. My name's David Linton, and today's edition for Friday, the 7th of June, comes to you from London. This very wet morning here in London. So we start by looking at the dollar, still bearish below the cloud, and we've got a couple of new downside targets being introduced here. This last one not yet activated. If that is activated with a new low, which would be below this level, that would give us cause for concern on the short term. Medium term, we're holding up, just finding some support on the cloud, and the long term, of course, still looks bullish. But that weaker dollar is tending to push to a stronger euro, and we see here the euro looking stronger this morning. Looking at the Japanese yen, we see the yen is looking very strong against the dollar, strong on the short, strong on the remembering that this is the dollar falling, yen rising. So we are seeing just a little bit the dollar recovering there on the short term. Taking a look at sterling, sitting at 127 against the dollar. Sterling has benefited from that weaker dollar over the last week, but we are still bearish medium and long term, of course, with some quite big downside targets on the long term chart. Sterling against the euro is weak on medium and long term and short term, as well as downside targets, so not looking great there against the euro. And against the Swiss franc, we're sitting at 126. Also just sterling showing its weakness, although the short term chart looking a little bit better this morning. Bitcoin still sitting around that $8,000 mark, and we're seeing here this morning just looking like it might recover into the into bullish territory there, so that's looking a bit better. The US stock market last night rose, so that's looking good, and then it's starting to on the short-term chart just look a little bit better. We highlighted yesterday we really cannot afford to fall below this low, because that would start to draw the charts into bearish territory. So this recent low is quite significant from a chart perspective. On the Nasdaq, we see here we found support on the cloud. If we fall through the low we saw earlier this week, that would take us into bearish territory on the daily Ichimoku. Looking at the Dow, much the same picture, finding support on the cloud. Again, if we fall through there, that would be bearish. We're back into bullish territory on the Dow, but really interesting how we've just struggled over the last 2 years really to make new highs in the market, and that's showing through. And the Russell 2000, the broader based index, shows here how we've really just struggled again to get anywhere near the highs that we saw in 2018. The futures this morning, the S&P futures up slightly, and the Nasdaq E-mini is up 0.12%, also a slight increase there. So it looks like we might just end the week holding the gains that we've seen. The FTSE 100 index is up this morning by 0.6%, and the 250 index is up by 0.2%, so not as strong in the mid caps. The German market up 0.2% as well, and starting to look a little bit more bullish. An upside target of 7% activated there on the medium term chart. The CAC 40 in Paris is up 1%. Looking stronger than the rest of the European markets. Japan was up 0.25%, sorry, 0.5%, and the Hang Seng Index up 0.2%. And the Chinese market continues to fall, down a further 1%, so not looking good there, making multi-month lows, levels that we haven't seen since February. India was virtually unchanged, and the Aussie market up 1%. So quite key there that we see that rise. Brent crude sitting at 1.5% higher this morning, 62.50. So we've recovered some poise there. That's just starting to look a little bit better on the short-term chart, but we can't get away from the fact that we've really moved into bearish territory on the medium term. And the WTI chart also similar picture, of course. US nat gas sitting at $2.34. We're just slowly edging lower to this $2 a mark, and again just in bearish territory. There's the lowest level we've seen in nat gas for several years, so really quite worrying that. Looking at gold, we're sitting at 1334 this morning, so we're still holding on to the bullish trend just. We've got this upside target still at 1434, so that is looking good for gold. And if we look at silver, similarly, we're remaining bullish there. US 10-year yields sitting at 2.12%. And just looking at German bond prices, of course, the reverse the yield, we're seeing bond prices rising very dramatically yesterday on that ECB announcement. And so bond prices rising, yields falling as the spectre of low interest rates hangs with us. Taking a look at the individual stocks, we start by looking at the US market. The Dow, we saw Chevron up 2.5%, so looking pretty strong there. And if we look at the chart there for Chevron, looking pretty good on the long-term chart. Just really has spent the last year going sideways, but we are just holding the ground. No big difference there versus the Dow Jones. Quite a flat performance the last 12 months. Exxon also up in sympathy. So we're seeing oil majors did quite well yesterday. On the downside, we've got DuPont. They've really struggled lately, and we see that the chart there has just fallen away. Looking at travelers companies, we were down 0.5% there as well, so that's quite significant too. Looking at the Nasdaq, we see here AMD were the best performer, up 7.8%, and on the downside, we've got BioMarin Pharmaceuticals. They were down 3.7%. The Aussie market is this morning we're seeing here GainCorp up 6%. That GrainCorp looking pretty bearish still on the long-term charts, and if we look at the short term, we've got Resolute Mining. They were down 7%, really just dipping them into negative territory there, taking them to multi-month lows. China, we had further falls, and just looking across the board here on China, we had China United Networks. They were down 4%. A lot of stocks down by similar amounts there, just pushing that index lower and not looking great there. The Nifty 50 index here in India, we've got Bharati Infratel. They're up 2.4%. So they're the best performer in the Nifty this morning. And looking at Dr. Reddy's Laboratories, they're down nearly 2.8%. So they've been hit quite hard, having had a very nice little recovery run here. We're just seeing that sell off. And versus the Dow, they really haven't made much ground this year. Taking a look into Europe now, we start with the UK market. And so we're looking here first of all at the FTSE 100 stocks. NMC Health up 2%, British American Tobacco up 2%, and if we look at the downside here, Sage Group down 2%. So being hit there, but that recovery in Sage is still pretty impressive. Then we see the real-time updates coming in. Share price has really recovered some 50% this last several months, so looking quite good for Sage, outperforming the Dow there as well. Taking a look at the FTSE 250, we've got Ferex Pro there up 7% this morning. That's looking pretty good. And then on the downside, Royal Mail Group down 3.5%. So that looking quite significant there. Taking a look at the Stocks 50 in Europe. We've got looking at the worst performers here. See the real-time updates just coming in there from Yahoo. Sanofi in Paris, they're up the best performer this morning. The chart looking pretty choppy, and on the downside, we've got Bayer down nearly 1%. That's it for today. Have a great weekend. See you on Monday. Happy charting. See you then.